Thank you for the introduction. I am Takahashi, lawyer. So today we will talk about the coordinated vulnerability disclosure, present and future. From Japan, we have Mr. Itabashi, the Information Promotion Agency in EU, Mr. Lorenzo Pupillo, and from the US, Allan Friedman. So I will give a brief introduction. So vulnerability. What is vulnerability? This will be introduced later. So early warning partnership. This is defined under Japan early warning partnership, computer virus, computer unauthorized access, security weakness where the functionality of performance can be impacted by an attack such as computer virus or unauthorized computer access. And ISO has a definition too. So, what is the meaning of vulnerability in the current society? So when we think of cybersecurity, this is a very important word. So cyber threats. It's like a fuel or something that triggers cyber threats. That is my view. So, for who will this be an opportunity? It is the criminals, which had been talked about yesterday and today, and the states, countries, as threat is also drawing attention. And direct involvement of the government happens in some cases. So when this vulnerability is detected, what action should be taken? So from the past, full disclosure is required. The attacker is known, so to protect from the attackers, we need to share information. That is the line of thinking. But there are other views. Others say full disclosure so this may lead to the abuse of the tools. So we need the information sharing in a responsible manner, some say. So more than 20 years ago, this discussion was held. So on this discussion, the current present state is the theme of today, coordinated vulnerability disclosure. So this is the direction we need to move into. And this is now becoming a reality. Various frameworks are established in Japan, Europe, and the US. But this vulnerability disclosure framework, it has difficulties. So as I mentioned at the outset, the full disclosure and the responsible disclosure are up against each other. So this is a complex matter. From these three areas, we invited three experts in the actual practice who will share with us the current state and how we should counter this matter. So that is the motivation or the purpose of this international symposium panel. So Lorenzo-san, could you explain EU's situation? Lorenzo-san, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Ikuo for putting this panel and CANAV, for the organization and to invite us here for this panel. I am an Associate Senior Research Fellow at CEPS. CEPS is a Center for European Policy Studies in Brussels. It's a think tank. And we have been working on software vulnerability disclosure since 2018, because we started doing a task force. It's basically a multi-stakeholder gathering of companies, institutions, academia, civil society, and we did an analysis of what was the situation as far as vulnerability disclosure policy in Europe. And we basically found that, that only 2 countries at that time were had in place vulnerability disclosure policies. But our work was important because triggered studies from ENISA and also some policy response in terms of legislation at the EU level. Today we're going to present briefly the study that we have done for ENISA on this matter. This study was done jointly with Wavestone, a consulting company, SEPS, ENISA, some people from ENISA itself. Briefly, I will cover these 3 topics: current state of play of CVD policy in the EU, key finding, and overview of challenges, edition of CVD national policies. What is the current status of play of CVD policy? As you can see from this map, when we started, only 2 countries, basically in 2018, only France and the Netherlands had a vulnerability disclosure policy in place. But what is also interesting to note is that while in the Netherlands, researchers to some extent were free, given some condition, to disclose vulnerability, they didn't have to pass through like cybersecurity agency or intelligence agency. Instead, in France, researchers were to some extent protected, but only at the condition that they were contacting and disclosing vulnerability through the intelligence agency in NC. Okay, so what we have done in our study, we have checked what was the situation in 2018, and we found that basically 4 members already had in place this policy, basically France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Lithuania. Okay, 10 members were 10 countries were in the process of doing that, and 9 members had not implemented at all a CVD policy. These are, tells you briefly, if you want, you can think about who are these member states, if you know, because we have no time to go over. But it's very clear that, there are some countries are very advanced, some other not, but things are moving in the direction of having coordinated vulnerability disclosure all over Europe. What are the key findings on this study, on CVD policy at the national level? We, using also a study done by the definition by the OECD, we have asked, which of the following processes of the vulnerability treatment life cycle do you consider more critical? Discovery, handling, management, public disclosure. And we can see very clearly that the management and handling of vulnerability disclosure are considered the most critical. This is interesting because say that, let's say the discovery and the disclosing are considered less critical, because probably the very issue is if we discover vulnerability, what we are going to do, how we are to manage this process. Okay, so it's the process, it's more critical. We find also, we ask what were the current good practice on CVD policy in the EU, and we found that in terms of content, a CVD policy, an ideal CVD policy should have in place an authorization to access the computer system, so what is called proportionality, under which condition I allow the researcher to have access to the computer system. What kind of information is required to report a vulnerability, how we keep confidential this process, what are the deadline, the procedural deadline within 90 days? This was the time that was suggested. How we keep in place the right communication channels among the different stakeholders of this process, the potential reward of security researchers, and then how we implement the public disclosure. Also in terms of good practices, we find some interesting elements that were mentioned during the interview that we have done with many member states. The reference to two standards, ISOC IEC and ISOC IEC 2914741 and 3011142. Also, in terms of approach, bottom-up approach, like what the Netherlands have done. In other words, the Netherlands, in theory, do not have a specific, like the government is not giving specific guideline on how to do the disclosure, but they creating from the bottom like an ecosystem that allows the disclosure of the vulnerability. The idea of talk to the vendors, familiarize with the ethical hacking communities, implement the OECD recommendation and good practices, adopt also the Common Security Advisory Framework. This is basically a warning information service system. Some of the elements that were also raised during this survey were who should be involved in this process. And it's very clear from the, this chart here that the majority of respondents say there should be the CERT. CERT should play a major role in this process, and then the National Cybersecurity Authority. Instead, less are thinking that it's a good idea to have a direct intervention by the minister or from outside entities, foreign entities, for instance. Then in terms of tools, dedicated website, implementation of ticketing systems, validation tools, and other tools of this kind. Very important, the idea of creating awareness raising campaign, like Lithuania CyberSec Breakfast or the Netherlands, like they are promoting, especially for young people, campaign that they call Hack Right, okay, to make aware, young people of the potential, the rule they should be used, in the context of Netherlands law, to report vulnerabilities, and operational and crisis management activities. We also looked at what are, if it is a situation, these are the good practices, what are the challenges and issues on CVD national policies. And we basically have asked, to the person that we have interviewed, to what extent can the following challenges impede the establishment of CVD policy in a country? Legal barriers, security, researcher faces significant legal risk, lack of cooperation among stakeholders, government ambiguity concerning vulnerability exploitation, limited market incentive, lack of resources and skill, cost of implementation operation. As you can see, the major issues, the legal barrier, and then the lack of cooperation among stakeholders. This again brings back the issue that that is extremely important. The process from the discovery to the disclosure of the vulnerability. How we manage this process? So the need of cooperation among stakeholders. Then we zoom the issue of the legal challenges, and we ask, if what was the major legal challenges? Criminal law, copyright law, data protection law, contract law, export control legislation. Again, it's very clear that the most relevant challenge is considered the legal the critical, the criminal law, basically, that it's blocking to some extent a smooth process of vulnerability disclosure. Then the data protection law. These are the two major challenges. Okay. Now, we have also considered other challenges, like the economic challenge, like the vulnerability software market dynamics, what we mentioned before, the lack of cooperation among stakeholders, limited market incentive for security researchers, the fact that most security researchers are activists, not professional employed by private companies, lack of resources and skill to implement CVD policy, and also the cost of implementation and operation of CVD policies. We consider also some political challenge. In other words, what type of model should be promoted? Top-down or bottom-up approach? In other words, who should start first? The government, the private sector, and so on. What is the role of the government? The government, for instance, could update imperfect cybercrime and intellectual property framework. What is the how to support enable CVD policy? But also extremely important, leading by example. Okay, so the government can be the first one to implement CVD policies. What about the role of the private sector? Should lead or should follow? Okay. Just and then I will close. Looking at what's happening in Europe, we can say that this is also something that we have already mentioned in our first report as SEPS in 2018. There are two questions related to the link of vulnerability discovery to criminal offense. The first one is under which condition, the find the vulnerabilities can be considered like under criminal law. And the second one is under which condition should, if this is a crime should be prosecuted. Now, this is interesting. The Budapest Convention, this is very important to mention. The Budapest Convention say very clear that only the unauthorized access should be considered as criminal offense. This means that as long as the company, the government, put in place a policy, they say, as long as you follow some rules, you are able to, to find vulnerabilities. This is extremely important, especially, for instance, some states like the Belgian will make this example. It's like if I buy the ticket to go on a bus, if I bought the ticket, I have the right to go on the bus. At the same time, in this case, if I follow some rules, I can look at and search for vulnerability under some specific condition. Overcoming some legal challenges, like from the member state, will be to amend the criminal law, amend the directive that the EU level impede the discovery of vulnerability, but also some ideas like the protection of security researcher by recognizing the status of whistleblower in the sense of Directive 1937. Some member states are also thinking about defining, by law to some extent, the role of ethical hackers. Okay, I will stop here just because I think I gave enough element of discussion. Thanks.
では、続きましてです。
Now, I would like to ask Mr. Itabashi to explain the current status in Japan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Itabashi from Information Technology Promotion Agency, Japan. At APA, I've been involved in information security early warning partnership for over 10 years, 15 years. So since I've been given this opportunity, I would like to talk about I would like to explain the information security early warning partnership conducted in Japan. Today, I would
like to first of all talk about the information security partnership. I would like to explain what the partnership is, and secondly, I would like to talk about the current operation of the partnership, and then lastly, as the third agenda item, I would like to talk about the challenges that we are facing, and the kind of countermeasures that we have in mind to overcome the challenges. First of all, Information Security Early Warning Partnership. Let me briefly explain what it is. This is based on the notice provided by Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, and the purpose is to secure the cybersecurity is software-related or vulnerability-related information. Recommendations need to be put together, and so as to make sure that we can ensure cybersecurity and to prevent damages caused to the society or to the citizens. And so that will be able to bring about vitality and sustainable development of the economy and society, and to contribute to the realization of a society in which citizens can live safely and with peace of mind. The Information Security Early Warning Partnership, IPA, METI, and JCERT, and also experts in Japan are have cooperated to design the partnership. And today, Mr. Takahashi is with us, and he has been involved from the designing stage, and he has provided a lot of support in operating the system. And with regards to the system, every year, as was explained earlier, including METI, security experts are invited, and IPA has a committee, and we invite experts to identify the challenges in operating the system so that we can improve the system. That is how we are running the partnership. And next, I would like to explain the guideline for the implementation of the partnership. Let me briefly explain what the guideline says. So based on the notice provided by METI, we have what we call the Information Security Early Warning Partnership Guideline to be implemented by the stakeholders. Specifically, IPA is the receiving entity, and the JCERT Coordination Center is in charge of coordinating. And in addition to that, the discoverer who find the vulnerabilities and also countermeasures identified by software developers and also as well as website operators. All of these stakeholders are collaborating to create countermeasures for vulnerabilities. And the partnership, early warning partnership, let me explain the scope of application. This guideline covers vulnerability that may affect a large number of people, specifically software products widely used in Japan and web applications that run on websites. So they are software products, basically within the scope. And with regards to websites, websites that can be accessed from Japan will be in the scope of application. This system covers software products and web applications. So there are two different reportings accepted through this system. Now, this is the third point about the system. As I have already explained, these are the relevant parties. In addition to IPA and JCERT, we have the discoverer, product developers, website operators. There are three stakeholders or relevant parties involved in the system, and to them, there are benefits that are brought about to the relevant parties, which are explained on the slide. For the discoverers who find the vulnerability through IPA, they will be able to provide or can prompt software developers and website operators to take actions against vulnerability through a public entity. And in the case of software developer, the discoverer's name will be published. So what is called JVN, the portal site, when we disclose vulnerability information, discoverer's name will also be disclosed. And in addition to that, for product developers, as written here, there are 3 benefits that will be provided to them. Website operators, same thing. We believe that these benefits will be brought to website operators as well. So this is how we are running the partnership system. And next, I would like to explain the structure of the operation. As I said, on the far left of the diagram, we have the discoverer who find the vulnerabilities, and they will be providing reports on the vulnerability that they found. They will provide a report to IPA, who is a receiving entity. At the top, it talks about the software product. And in that case, in the case of software, IPA will be reported by the discoverer, and IPA will provide a report or provide notification to JP-CERT CC. And JP-CERT CC will often identify the software developer, and JP-CERT will contact the software developer. And once the product vulnerability is corrected, as written at the top, IPA JP-CERT, where it says vulnerability information portal site, vulnerability related information will be posted on the portal site. And when that is posted, the discoverer's name will also be published. And now for the website vulnerability for web applications, likewise, discoverer will provide a report to IPA. And in this case, IPA will go directly to the website operator. IPA will identify the contact information of the website operator, and they will directly contact the operator, so the website operator will be able to take actions. This is the operational structure of the early warning partnership. Now, so let me explain the operational status of early warning partnership. This system, I don't know if I talked about this, but it started in 2004 in July. And up until today, it's been in operation for about 18 years. Every year, we are reporting number of reports, which is shown in the bar chart. Blue represents software products, and colored in yellow and pink are website-related reports. And the graph shows up until the end of 2021, and the total number of reports received is 17,139. And now, I would like to explain the most recent 3 years. For the past 3 years, the number of reports are shown in this graph. The graph above shows the quarterly number of reports. And, in 2022, for the second quarter, April through June, the number of reports received was 75 for software products and 88 for websites. And on the right-hand side, we have a table which shows the number of vulnerability reports received in the second quarter of 2022. Shows the numbers on the bar chart. Software 75, and it shows the cumulative total is 5,157. And for website, a cumulative number is 12,308. Cumulative total is 17,465 cases. And the graph at the bottom shows vulnerability countermeasure information released for software products. So with the number of vulnerability countermeasures disclosed is shown in green chart. For the second quarter of 2022, 24 releases have been made. And now, talking about the operational status once again, as of June 2022, both for software products and websites, it shows the operational status for both. And as you can see, at the top we have the software products. The total number is 5,157 reports. And they publicized 2,417 where the countermeasures are published. And written in yellow, there are some that are still being under process, 2,087. So out of the total number of reports, about 40% to 48% are now being handled or in process. And the graph at the bottom shows the status of the website-related reports. For websites, it says fixed. 8,290 items have already been fixed. And the total is 12,308. So therefore, 86% of total have already been fixed. And next slide shows it's not really operational status, but rather reporting status. So the number of software-related vulnerability. It shows the type of products are shown in the pie chart. So if you can take a look at that, web application, routers account for about 50% of the total number of reports. And as we see expansion in the use of smartphone, there is an increase in smartphone application-related vulnerabilities reported. And the pie chart at the bottom shows the impact of vulnerabilities reported. So, for example, execution of arbitrary scripts, execution of arbitrary commands, those account for about 50% of the total number of reports. And next slide is about website. The pie chart at the top shows types of vulnerabilities. Cross-site scripting account for about 58% of total. So 60% of the total is related to cross-site scripting. And it says incomplete configuration of DNS, SQL injection. If we add those, 80% of the reports related to those three items. And at the bottom, we have the reports by impact. And we have over 50% or 50% or 57% of display of false information on the genuine website. That is all for the operational status. And lastly, I would like to talk about the operational challenges that we face as we operate this early warning partnership. First of all, challenges related to software products. There are three things. First is it takes time for developers to respond to vulnerability reports. Of course, once software products, when they're reported, there are different types of software products, including smartphones, and there are also reports related to control software. So even if we make contacts to the developers about the vulnerabilities, developers take time. It takes time for them to take necessary actions. And the second challenge is losing contact with the developer in the middle of coordination. Sometimes we lose contact with them. So this is quite similar, but there is a wide range of software products for which we receive reports, and also individuals. There are cases that the individuals make reports. So even if the discoverer make reports in the coordination, we sometimes lose contact with the developers. And thirdly, I believe this is not an issue limited to Japan, but people have negative impacts, or product developers have negative attitudes towards the publication of vulnerability countermeasure information. So publishing vulnerability countermeasure information means that it shows that software products have many vulnerabilities, which may equal to software products having poor quality. So the developers do not want to be proactively publishing vulnerability-related information. So we haven't been able to raise the awareness of the developers that it is a good thing to disclose vulnerability-related information. And next is related to website challenges related to the operation of the system. There are two items. First is it takes time to contact with website operators. So we receive reports on the vulnerability also of the websites, and when we do, we receive information like URL, but IPA would view the pages to identify the contact information, but it is often not possible to identify the security-related contact person, and IPA would try its best to find the contact information, but it's not easy, which means that we are not able to notify the website operator of their vulnerability on their website. So it takes time to contact them. That's the first challenge. And the second challenge is very much like the software-related challenge. It takes time for them to take actions. So they are large corporations and individuals that are operating these websites. And we are receiving reports for different types of websites. And we would provide information about the vulnerability to the website operators, but they may not have the skill to take actions, or they don't have the resources to implement countermeasures against the vulnerability reported. So about the challenges, what are the things that the IPA is thinking about to overcome those challenges? About software products, there are two things that we are thinking about. First is to recognize product developers who are proactive in taking vulnerability countermeasures. That is what we are thinking about. For example, reported vulnerability. If the software developers are proactive in taking actions and proactive in disclosing that information, probably provide some kind of recognition for their attitude, which is something that is now under study. And the second is spreading the word about the need for vulnerability countermeasures to product developers. Even if we provide information about the vulnerability, many of the product developers do not have a good understanding on the need to take actions, which is something that we need to work on. So IPA and related organizations are using different channels to provide education to software developers. This is an ongoing process, and we would like to continue with this. And about the reporting related to websites, so there are two things that we are thinking of implementing. The first one is, I talked about this earlier as a challenge. It's not easy to find the contact information of website operators. So at IPA, we are saying that if you are to operate a website, since there is a possibility that security-related vulnerability may be reported to us, please make sure that contact information is available on the website. That kind of guideline is provided. So we would like to utilize that guideline to raise the awareness. And the second is vulnerability countermeasure. I think there is a need to educate the website operators the need to implement the countermeasures. So we would like to create. We do have educational materials already, so we would like to continue with our educational campaign to raise the awareness. And including these actions, we would like to continue to try to overcome the challenges that I shared. Lastly, I talked about the reporting system or information security early warning partnership system was explained. And in the future, I'm hoping that you will be able to have a good understanding on the system and be able to improve the system for the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
とうございました。では、
Itabashi-san, thank you very much. We would like to ask Mr. Allan Friedman to explain about the current status in the U.S.
Thank you very much, Ikuo-san. To make sure we have time for discussion, I will try to be quickly, and so I apologize to the translators. My name is Allan Friedman. I am known as the guy who does not shut up about S-bomb, but today I will talk about the U.S. policy on CVD. In 2015, I ran the first U.S. government public effort on disclosure, where we said, hey, we have been fighting over this since the 1990s. Let's put hackers and companies in the same room and talk about obstacles for collaboration. And the good news is that 2022 is different from 2015. 2015, there was still a lot of fighting. Whereas today, I would argue, CVD in many parts of the world, including Japan, is not a dangerous topic. We can talk about it, and we have made a lot of progress. So very briefly, the US policy has embraced CVD, as have many governments. And now our focus is on lowering barriers to moving good vulnerability information around. The laws have not changed, but they are being interpreted better. And we now spend our time focusing on how to help the private sector work with researchers. So there are a couple of laws. The first one is criminal. The second one is civil. And the good news is that we are doing a lot better on interpreting these laws. The Department of Justice this year issued a clarification where the main department directs all federal prosecutors to say, if you see a disclosure and it is good faith, do not prosecute. And similarly, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act has more and more exceptions, especially for civil work. So, happy to talk more about the legal side if you want to know more. But the other thing that I want to talk about today is how the vulnerability ecosystem is making it easier to report and fix vulnerabilities. So I won't go through all these slides. But first, who knows the CVE program? Everyone should know the CVE. Who has a CVE? Anyone found their own bug? Have a number? There we go. Couple. So a CVE is the trade for vulnerabilities for products. And the goal is to say, let's enable more people to assign CVEs. And so this is, the model here is when a CVE numbering authority becomes aware of a vulnerability, then they coordinate, and then we assign the ID. They can lead the assignment, so it does not have to go through the centralization. Anyone can become a CNA in different categories. Most of them are vendors or open source projects, but bug bounty programs and researchers, hackers can become their own CNA. And so if anyone is interested, my plea is let me talk to you afterwards and we can get you started on the process. This is a global effort. There are currently, I believe, 9 CNAs in Japan, including many of our sponsors. Thank you. And also JP CERT plays a very good role, and I want to thank them and their government sponsors. So the path to becoming a CNA, very briefly, is you reach out to the CVE program, or you can come talk to CISA, or you can talk to JP CERT. You register, we look at the requirements, and there's onboarding, there's training, so you don't have to do it all yourself. And then you can join. So this is a very important part of the collaboration moving forward because we want to make it easy for researchers to work with the people who make and maintain the software. And the CNA program is critical for that collaboration. So I don't need to go through this, so I will instead try to welcome the panel up because we have just a few minutes to talk about how to compare these efforts. So thank you, and if you would like to know more, come talk to me today.
Thank you, Allan. So I'd like to welcome the panelists to come up on the stage and take a seat. So we don't have much time left, but let us start the discussion. So first, ENISA. Lorenzo-san talked about the legal challenges and the economic challenges and the political challenges. For the legal challenge, Japan is also working hard. So I want to touch on what Japan is doing. So the first introduction. In October 2017, security service providers, P2P, the researcher researching P2P was arrested. Security service provider was arrested, and he was subsequently not prosecuted, but he was arrested, and this was an impactful incident. So the law enforcement level need to understand the important role played by the security service provider, cybersecurity experts. So that's what I think as a legal expert. So this early warning partnerships, the legal efforts made in early warning partnerships. The guideline has a very detailed guideline explanation from a legal perspective. And furthermore, the detailed legal points. At the starting point of 2004, I wrote an instruction, and so this is also made public and was revised 3 years ago. And reverse engineering is may infringe the copyright law in discovering the vulnerability, and so it took 10 years to revise the original law, but this copyright law was also revised. Reverse engineering for the purpose of security is from the fair use principle in Japan. It is now become legal in Japan. And cybercrime. The law enforcement authority need to take solid action, and this awareness is rising. For example, IPA has people over here, and in April, cyber police agency, there was a reorganization, so we are hoping that we can improve our level, increase our level. So these are the practical matters in Japan. So how can the developer side, for the developer side's report, for the developer's vulnerability report and disclosure, how can we fairly evaluate and assess it and take appropriate action and take it seriously? in order to secure this proper process, how can we ensure the sincere, honest attitude of the developers? So I want to ask from US and Europe. So Lorenzo-san, do you have any examples, like you design incentives or any example you can share with us?
Well, I can say that in the EU, our research also what the European the Commission is planning for. It's basically say that if you follow the proportionality criteria, the Budapest Conventions allow you to implement this CVT policy. So private sector, can do that. They don't need, like example from the government, but they can just put on their own website this CVT policy. So I would say that they don't need a specific incentive to do that.
ありがとうございます。アランさんも同じ質問なんですけれども。
I have a question to Allan-san as well. Same question to you. Anything that's been considered in the U.S.?
I think it is useful to draw a distinction between inactivity from ignorance versus the people who know better. The first time a researcher knocks on your door, it can be scary. And so the role of both government and the security world should be to help that first time go smoothly. And it's also important for the researcher to understand, okay, this is a new organization. That is a different problem from the software supplier that just does not want to take action. And that's where we need both incentives and continuing the occasional habit of saying, if there's no response, then other people need to step in. And the last thing I'll say where we have helped with tools is multi-party disclosure. What happens with something like Log4j, and there's going to be a vulnerability that is announced in the next week, which affects lots of vendors. And for that, we need very good coordination between the vendor community. There is a new tool called VINCE, which allows automated and secure coordination that the US government has been using in the CNA process.
なるほど。板橋さんに伺いたい。
So I have a question to you, Itabashi-san. So this early warning partnership, when this was first established, what situation led to this establishment? So the history that led to the establishment of this system, the structure is the person who detected the vulnerability contacted the software company, then the response was, is this person a hacker? So the counterpart did not deal with the person or listen attentively. And therefore, to avoid or solve this problem, government agency, the public agency became an intermediator to distribute and enhance the countermeasure of vulnerability disclosure. And that is why we established this framework. So this system is welcomed by the related community. So PCERT, companies that introduce PCERT is increasing now. Is that right? Yes, exactly. IPA. Without the involvement of IPA, the discoverer, the interaction, there are some more and more vendors that have direct interaction with the discoverer of the vulnerability, and PCERT is now established more among the vendors.
So, considering the current situation, the government's website or the software used by the government, a full vulnerability related to those websites and software, take actions against them and make secure the websites run by the government. So, Allan-san, can you explain the efforts made by the U.S. government?
So we know that writing secure software is hard. The government cannot do it better than the private sector. In fact, often government-written software is worse. And so there has been an effort in the US government, and in fact a requirement, that every US government agency must have a disclosure policy, so that when someone discovers a flaw in the tax website or the labor website, they can be notified. And there are now bug bounties in the US government. This is not new, going back 4 or 5 years. Even a program called Hack the Pentagon, which is, the very serious national security website. So we have been working on living our policy advice.
ありがとうございます。同じ質問なんですけど、ロレンツさん、EU。
Same question to Lorenzo-san. What are the efforts made in the U.S.? How is EU securing the security of the government websites?
Well, our research showed that the government should lead by example, and the European Commission is giving guidelines, to the member state to implement CVD policies. This is the case of the NATO infrastructure security revision that required that each member state should develop a national vulnerability, software vulnerability process policy, and also the more recent proposal of the Cyber Resilience Act that covers the products or complement to some extent the needs to, and has a very strict requirement for the products in terms of how to operate vulnerability disclosure.
ありがとうございます。で、板橋さんに、日本の政府
So Itabashi-san, if I ask you about the status of Japanese government, it will be a difficult situation, so I will avoid that question. But given the Japanese framework, digital agency was established last year. This digital agency is very active, need to play a very active role in this arena, right? Yes. Regarding the government system, digital agency is the responsible agency to ensure the security countermeasures in each agency, ministries and agencies. So that's the instruction that the digital agency is giving out. And the efforts in the Netherlands, the government, if government site is hacked, this kind of T-shirt is given. So, Allan-san, so if you hack, you get this T-shirt, right? In Japan, if we hack Japanese government, what kind of T-shirt can we get? Don't know, but we need to enhance Japanese government security going forward. So,
フロアからのですね。
So, I'm sorry that we have run out of time and we won't be able to receive any questions from the audience. But with this, I would like to conclude the panel discussion about coordinated vulnerability disclosure. Thank you very much for your kind attention.